I want to thank both of my colleagues for allowing me to come before this body to speak on behalf of the people of the city of Chicago, the people of the 1st Congressional District.
I got pictures.
Mr. Speaker,
I knew.
I must say that although Muhammad Ali was and is a native of Louisville, that's his birthplace, but I must also claim that Chicago is his adopted city. He spent many, many years in Chicago, bought a home on South Kenwood Avenue in my district. And as a young man, Mr. Speaker, young civil rights activist myself, I can't even express the pride that I had when I would travel down the street and point out to my young sons and anybody else who was with me that that's where Muhammad Ali lives. He was a man of the neighborhoods in Chicago. He touched many people, young people, old people who didn't necessarily share his same political or religious ideas, but he touched them anyhow. Mr. Speaker, Muhammad Ali was a man for all seasons. Yes, he achieved prominence in the boxing arena, in the sweet science of boxing, but he achieved greatness because of the life that he led both inside boxing and outside of boxing. Mr. Speaker, on Saturday afternoons, many of us who had few heroes would gather around television sets and watch Muhammad Ali fight in the heavyweight division against other fighters and other boxers. And when his predictions came true, when he defeated and knocked out his opposition in the time that he said he would, and there was a collective cheer, and then you could hear throughout the neighborhoods of Chicago. He meant something to me. He meant something to others. Muhammad Ali not only achieved and worked hard and sacrificed for excellence, but he also inspired excellence in others. Muhammad Ali would walk down some of the main thoroughfares in Chicago, 47th Street, 79th Street, Madison Avenue. Walk down those streets and the crowds would just gather around him and follow him. And his beam in his eyes and the halo and the charisma that he had just made for an exciting time, a grand time for all of us. Mr. Speaker, Muhammad Ali not only was a great boxer, but he was indeed a man for all times. Look at his following, not just in Louisville, not just on the south and west sides of Chicago, but all across the nation, all across the world, foreign countries, African countries specifically, the same kind of enthusiasm that he inspired, the same kind of reverence that he inspired to the young men and young women in Chicago. You can see that same kind of inspiration rear up in the Congo, in Nigeria, in Zaire, in other places all across the world. Mr. Speaker, when he retired, I remember as a freshman here in Congress, when we had a session and we honored the 50 greatest athletes of all time, of the century rather. And here was some great athletes. But the one who I wanted to be with, the one who I was most excited about, the one who I wanted to be photographed with, was only Muhammad Ali. Bart Starr, Kareem Abdul, many, many others was here. But Muhammad Ali was here. And he kind of sucked the air out of the room. Later, Mr. Speaker, when I chaired the annual legislative conference for the dinner, the gala, chaired the gala, I was so honored that he came to accept an award from the Congressional Black Caucus with his lovely wife, Alani. Another great time, another great memory. But Mr. Speaker, those who are here, the greatest honor, the greatest moment of inspiration, my most profound memory of Muhammad Ali was when he refused to go to fight in the Vietnam War. I think, in my humble opinion, had he just been a great champion, we've had other great champions who are African American. Jack Johnson, Sugar Ray Robinson, many others who were great champions. But Muhammad Ali wasn't just a boxer. He didn't just inspire others to take up boxing. I was a political activist in the 60s. And Muhammad Ali spoke to the quintessential aspect of all my activism when he said, "Hell no, I won't go. Hell no, I won't go. no Vietnamese have ever called me the N-word, and he said it. I don't want to say it on the floor, but he said it. And Mr. Speaker, from that moment on, he solidifies his appeal, his essence, his relationships. He solidified himself with all the people of the world, of the nation, of the world. Let me just say this. I thought about Muhammad Ali when I heard of his death, and I thought of trying to recapture some of my memories of him, how he walked, his God, how he talked. Remember his size. Remember the face that was also a beautiful face. He was proud of how he looked. But Mr. Speaker, I guess what inspired me most about Muhammad Ali was how he did not surrender his faith, surrender his belief, surrender his core values to that U.S. Selective Service which drafted him. And just
If
think
the
about
gentleman
it.
would yield for a second, we need to
All right.
close down. We've got another
one more
speaker,
time.
Mr.
One,
Rush.
and one
Thank you.
thing, one other thing. Mr. Speaker, I just want, and thank you so much. I don't remember the names of the men who were on that Selective Service Committee. I don't remember anything about them. They thought that they was destroying the people's champ, but they could not destroy the people's champ. He rose even above all those people who were officially appointed to bring him down. Nobody could knock out Muhammad Ali in a real sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rush. I'd now like to yield to the gentlelady from Texas, Sheila Jackson.